On a quiet winter evening, in the small city of Muncie, Indiana, in late 1978, two little boys walked out, end of their foster home, and seemed to vanish into thin air. No screams. No witnesses. Yet no ransom demands. No bodies. Just silence, a silence that has haunted investigators, devastated a family,
and fueled one of America's most heartbreaking missing children mysteries for nearly half a century.
Because their names were Orrin West and Orson West, twin brothers who were just 9 years old when they disappeared. Their story is not simply about two missing children, it is about years of neglect and unanswered questions, conflicting accounts, failed investigations, and a mystery that continues to torment everyone.
Who has ever searched for the truth? Even today, many believe someone knows exactly what happened that night,
but has never come forward. To understand how two children could disappear without leaving a trace, we must begin long before that cold November evening. Orrin and Orson were born into difficult circumstances. Their early years were marked by instability, family struggles, and constant uncertainty. Like thousands of children across America, they eventually entered
the foster care system, a place that was supposed to protect them and provide the safe childhood
they deserved. Instead, it would become the setting for one of the country's most enduring unsolved disappearances.
Because the brothers were energetic, curious, and inseparable. Teachers and neighbors described them as typical boys
who loved playing outside, exploring their surroundings, and spending time together. Wherever one brother went, the other followed, and their bond was so close that people rarely mentioned one name without immediately saying the other. Because they were twins not only by birth, but by spirit. Despite the hardships they had experienced,
there were signs that they remained hopeful. They laughed together, dreamed together, and looked forward to simple
childhood adventures that most children take for granted. Eventually, they were placed with foster parents who lived
in a rural area outside Muncie. The location seemed peaceful. Fields stretched across the countryside, wooded areas
surrounded the property, and traffic was minimal. To outsiders, it looked like the perfect place for children to grow up away from danger. But appearances can be deceiving. According to official accounts, the evening of November 17 began like many others. The boys reportedly spent time around the home before heading outside,
and their foster parents later claimed the twins had wandered away while playing in the yard. Initially,
there appeared to be little reason to panic. Children sometimes explored nearby woods or visited neighboring properties before returning home. But as darkness settled over the rural landscape, concern quickly turned into fear. So the foster parents contacted authorities and a massive search operation began almost immediately. Local deputies, volunteers,
firefighters, neighbors, and eventually state police flooded the area. Search dogs combed the fields. Helicopters flew overhead.
And divers examined nearby ponds and streams. Every inch of surrounding farmland was searched repeatedly. Officers believed
that if the boys had simply become lost, they would eventually be found hiding, cold, frightened,
or calling for help. But hour after hour passed without a single clue, no footprints that clearly identified the twins, no discarded clothing, no signs of struggle, no evidence suggesting they had wandered into dangerous terrain. Because search dogs reportedly struggled to establish a consistent scent trail, something investigators found deeply troubling.
It was almost as though the boys had simply disappeared from the face of the earth. Days turned
into weeks. The search expanded far beyond Delaware County. Missing child posters appeared throughout Indiana and neighboring states,
and law enforcement agencies shared information nationwide. The newly emerging national attention on missing children brought additional
investigators into the case, each hoping fresh eyes might uncover something others had missed. Yet every lead
ended the same way, with disappointment. Some reported seeing two boys walking along highways. Others believed they had,
spotted them at truck stops, shopping centers, or bus stations. Each reported sighting raised hope for the family,
only to collapse after investigators determined the children were someone else. The emotional toll became almost unbearable.
As months passed, the focus of investigators slowly shifted away from the possibility that the boys had simply
wandered off. Experienced detectives began asking difficult questions.
Behind any physical evidence? Why had extensive searches failed to uncover even the smallest trace? Was someone else involved? Those questions transformed the investigation. Detectives began interviewing everyone connected to the boys. Family members, neighbors, teachers, social workers, and especially the foster parents faced repeated questioning. Investigators examined timelines minute by minute, looking
for inconsistencies that might reveal what truly happened. Some statements reportedly changed over time. Certain details appeared unclear or contradictory.
While these inconsistencies fueled suspicion, none provided enough evidence to support criminal charges.
Because without physical evidence, investigators found themselves trapped between theories and facts. Public opinion became increasingly divided.
Some believed the twins had wandered into remote woods and succumbed to exposure, their remains somehow overlooked.
Despite repeated searches, others considered the possibility of an abduction by a stranger passing through the rural area.
Because child abductions during the late 1970s had begun receiving greater national attention, making this theory difficult to dismiss entirely.
Yet investigators struggled with one enormous problem. There was no evidence of a kidnapping.
And no suspicious vehicle had been definitively identified. No credible witnesses reported seeing anyone take the boys. No ransom demand ever arrived. If someone had abducted Orrin and Orson, they had done so with extraordinary precision, leaving virtually nothing behind. Another theory emerged quietly among investigators and community members alike.
What if the boys never left the property alive? What if something tragic had happened inside or near the foster
home, followed by an elaborate effort to conceal the truth? This possibility became one of the most controversial
aspects of the investigation. Authorities never publicly accused the foster parents of murder, yet scrutiny surrounding them intensified.
Because detectives reportedly conducted multiple interviews, examined the property repeatedly, and searched surrounding land more than once. Despite these efforts, no definitive evidence supporting foul play at the residence was ever discovered. The absence of evidence frustrated investigators almost as much as the disappearance itself. Every potential answer seemed to create even more questions.
Why were there no reliable tracks leading away from the home? Why had search dogs produced inconsistent results?
Why had nobody heard the boys calling for help? How could two children disappear in an area
surrounded by volunteers within such a short period of time? These unanswered questions gradually transformed the case
into one of Indiana's greatest mysteries. Years passed, but the investigation refused to die. Advances in forensic science
encouraged detectives to revisit evidence collected during the original search. Improvements in DNA analysis, ground-penetrating radar, and cadaver
dog techniques inspired renewed searches across properties connected to the case. Each new technological breakthrough brought fresh optimism. Modern science might succeed where traditional investigative methods had failed. Yet once again, and every search concluded without locating the twins. The emotional impact extended far beyond law enforcement. Community volunteers who had spent
countless hours searching fields and forests never forgot those days. Many later admitted they replayed the investigation repeatedly,
in their minds, wondering whether they had overlooked something crucial. Some believed the boys were buried somewhere nearby. Others remained convinced they had been taken far from Indiana within hours of disappearing. Every theory reflected the same painful reality: no one truly knew what had happened. As the decades passed, the mystery attracted national
media attention. Television programs dedicated to missing persons featured the twins case. Newspapers published anniversary articles asking readers
to come forward with any information, no matter how insignificant it seemed. Tips continued arriving from across the United States. Some callers claimed deathbed confessions. Others insisted relatives had admitted involvement years earlier. Several tips led investigators to conduct additional searches on private properties, abandoned wells, wooded areas, and rural farmland.
None produced the breakthrough investigators desperately needed. Meanwhile, the lives of everyone connected to the case continued moving forward under the shadow of uncertainty.
Detectives retired without solving the mystery. Family members grew older while holding on to fading hope that one day the truth would finally emerge. Every birthday served as another reminder of the childhood Orrin and Orson never had. Every holiday became another painful milestone, marked by empty chairs and unanswered questions.
Missing children cases often reach a point where public attention fades, but the disappearance of Orrin and Orson refused
to vanish from collective memory. True crime researchers, journalists, retired investigators, and internet communities repeatedly revisited the evidence,
analyzing every available document, interview, and timeline. Online discussions generated new theories, challenged old assumptions, and questioned decisions made during the original investigation.
Some believed law enforcement focused too heavily on one theory while overlooking others. Others argued that critical evidence may have been lost due to investigative limitations of the late 1970s. Modern investigators acknowledge that missing children investigations today differ dramatically from those conducted decades ago. Today, Amber Alerts, surveillance, cameras, mobile phone tracking, digital forensics, automatic license plate readers, and nationwide databases provide tools investigators simply did not possess when Orrin and Orson disappeared. Had the boys vanished under today's investigative framework, the first few critical hours would have unfolded very differently. Unfortunately, in 1978, detectives relied heavily on witness interviews, physical searches, and limited forensic resources. Time, the most valuable asset in any missing child investigation, slipped away quickly.
We chase the truth, but the cost is often measured in the quiet erosion of our own peace of mind.
Unresolved cases remain with them forever. Unlike solved homicides, where families eventually receive answers, missing children investigations leave, everyone trapped in permanent uncertainty. Every new unidentified remains case raises hope and dread simultaneously. Every excavation brings another possibility. Every anonymous tip forces investigators to reopen emotional wounds that never truly healed. In the case of Orrin and Orson,
that cycle has repeated for decades. Even now, law enforcement agencies continue encouraging anyone
with information to come forward, believing someone, somewhere, may still hold the missing piece that explains what happened during those final hours. Was it an accident concealed out of fear? A carefully planned crime? An opportunistic abduction? Or a completely different scenario that investigators have never imagined? Those questions remain unanswered, but one fact has never changed. 2 little boys vanished without a trace, leaving behind one of the most haunting mysteries in American history. And as investigators continued examining old evidence with fresh determination, an entirely new series of disturbing leads began to surface. Leads that would reignite suspicion, expose long-forgotten inconsistencies, and force everyone to reconsider whether the truth had been hiding in plain sight all along. As the years turned into decades,
the mystery surrounding Orrin and Orson West refused to fade into history. Instead, it became one of those rare,
missing children cases that continued to haunt investigators long after the original detectives had retired. Every few years, advances in forensic science offered a new reason to hope. Law enforcement revisited old case files, re-interviewed witnesses, examined evidence collected during the original investigation, and even searched properties connected to the case using modern technology
that simply did not exist in 1978. Cadaver dogs, ground-penetrating radar, aerial mapping, and improved DNA techniques all
promised the possibility of uncovering the truth. Yet every renewed effort ended the same way, with more questions than answers.
Despite countless hours of work, investigators found no physical evidence that could definitively explain what happened to the twin brothers.
The lack of evidence has made the case especially frustrating. Usually, even the most carefully concealed crimes leave behind something: a witness, a piece of clothing, a fingerprint, or a trail that eventually leads investigators to the truth. But in this case, almost nothing has ever been found. That absence of evidence has fueled countless theories over the years. Some believe the boys became lost in the rural and succumbed to the elements before their remains were somehow missed during the extensive searches.
Others believe they were abducted by someone passing through the area. although no credible evidence has ever confirmed that possibility.
Another theory, discussed for decades because of inconsistencies and unanswered questions surrounding the circumstances of the disappearance, that the boys may never have left the property alive. However, despite years of scrutiny, investigators have never, were introducing a new feature, publicly produced sufficient evidence to prove that theory or to bring criminal charges against anyone. Because the case remains officially unsolved, every explanation remains exactly that, a theory, not a proven fact. That uncertainty is perhaps the cruelest part of the entire story. For investigators, there was no arrest. For the community, there was no explanation. And for the family, there was never the opportunity to truly grieve with certainty. Instead, they were left with an endless cycle of hope and heartbreak. Every reported sighting of two young boys brought
renewed optimism before eventually collapsing under investigation. Every discovery of unidentified human remains somewhere in the country forced
authorities to ask the same painful question. Could this finally be Orrin and Orson? Time after time, the answer was no. True crime researchers and independent investigators began studying every available document, newspaper article, and interview. They analyzed timelines, compared witness statements,
mapped search areas, and debated every possible scenario. Some believed the original investigation overlooked important details
because of the limited technology available at the time. Others argued that investigators did everything reasonably possible given the circumstances. Cases like this often survive because memories change. Relationships end. Loyalties disappear.
People who remained silent decades ago sometimes choose to speak later in life, driven by guilt, fear, or a desire
to finally do the right thing. That is why investigators have never officially closed the case. They continue to encourage anyone with credible information, no matter how small or insignificant it may seem, to come forward.
To encourage anyone with credible information, no matter how small or insignificant it may seem, to come forward.
Even a forgotten conversation, an unusual observation, or a detail that once appeared meaningless could become the missing piece that finally explains what happened. Today, if Orrin and Orson West are still alive, they would be older men who have spent nearly their entire lives separated from the identities they were born with.
While that possibility grows increasingly unlikely with the passing years, investigators have never completely abandoned hope. Missing person cases have
occasionally been solved decades later through DNA testing, genealogical research, or long-buried confessions. Until definitive evidence proves otherwise, the case remains open. The disappearance of Orrin and Orson West is more than just another unsolved mystery. It is a reminder of how fragile childhood can be, how devastating unanswered questions are for families,
how a single night can leave scars that last for generations. Two little African-American boys walked into history without
anyone knowing where they went, and nearly half a century later, their names are still spoken by investigators, determined to uncover the truth. Whether the answer lies beneath forgotten ground, inside a sealed case file, in the conscience of someone who has remained silent for decades, one thing is certain: Orrin and Orson
West deserve to be found, and their story deserves to be remembered. Because until the truth is finally uncovered,
this is not simply a cold case. It is an unfinished chapter in American history, one that
reminds us that behind every missing person poster is a family waiting for the phone call that never came.
Investigators refusing to surrender to time, and two young brothers whose lives mattered then, whose lives still matter now, and whose disappearance remains one of the most heartbreaking unsolved mysteries in the United States.